Today we are joined by Patrick McCann. Patrick is the incoming CEO of the City of London Law Society. He is also the co-CEO of City Sentry.
And I saw pictures of dead bodies, essentially. So 3 or 4 of these Russian sailors had just been killed by the force of this tidal wave. So that was a bit of a moment where you realise just how real stuff is, and that, being a lawyer is a very protected, comfortable-ish, not going to kill you, hopefully, type job.
What made you make that decision that you want to work in an area of law where you're going to have an impact on someone's life?
Is this the sort of work that I should be doing, I want to be doing, that should be done? What is my gut saying? Does this feel right? Does it feel wrong? I'm not quite sure in the middle. Who is it serving and how?
Hello everyone. Today we are joined by Patrick McCann. Patrick is the incoming CEO of the City of London Law Society. He is also the co-CEO of City Sentry, a solicitor apprentice initiative with around 50 law firms. He is co-founder of the Social Welfare Solicitors Qualification Fund, for which he has personally raised 1.275 million. He is the immediate past director of learning at Linklaters, responsible for the firm's learning and development strategy, co-managing a K&L team of 150. Previously head of learning at 3 law firms, having qualified as a solicitor in 1992. Patrick is the immediate past chair of the City of London Law Society Training Committee. He was recognised as a Champion of the Year at the 2024 UK Social Mobility Awards, as a top 10 UK legal LinkedIn influencer, as a special mention recipient at the 2024 British LGBT Awards, and was shortlisted for LGBT plus Champion at the 2024 Legal 500 ESG Awards. The projects and teams he has led have been shortlisted for around 25 national awards in the last year or so, to date winning over half. Patrick is out as queer and late diagnosed as neurodiverse. He is a passionate activist on DEI and B matters. Patrick, how are you? Thank you for joining us today.
Well, no, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the context within which you're inviting people like me to speak. It's really nice to help you a bit with this.
No, the pleasure's all ours. I'm sure the discussion is going to be very enlightening for our viewers and listeners. Patrick, for those meeting you for the first time, could you tell us a bit about your background and the path that led you into the legal field?
Yeah, sure. So, I am the son of a soldier and a secretary, and I was born in 1968, so a little while ago. And my dad, his job used to move about every 20 months, so we moved around a lot between Germany and England. My mum is German. I was brought up bilingual. I went to state school, went to army junior schools, and then I went to state schools, a state school from when I was 10 to when I was 17. I jumped a year in, so I didn't do fourth year juniors. I jumped a year to get into the secondary school for various good reasons. And it was around about that time that there was this cool, he was like a lawyer come detective called Petricelli. It was an American series and it ran for about 2 seasons. And he was just a really cool guy, and I decided I wanted to be like him. So you can imagine you're 10 or 11 years old and you tell your mum and dad and your teachers that you want to become a lawyer, and no one's going to argue with you at that point, because I think that's a cool thing. So I did well enough at school that I managed to get into King's College London to do a law and German law degree. To me, it was sort of a surprise that I managed to get in. I went to that university. It was full of posh kids who I found really intimidating, because of these gorgeous, rich voices and knew lots of classical music and opera, and would generally just had a life where they had lots of richness to the stuff that they'd experienced. So I was intimidated at university by their sort of assuredness. And then I came out in my 3rd year, and my grades shot up in my last year, the 4th year, and I managed to secure a training contract with a firm called Denton's, Denton Hall at the time now, at Denton's. And so I started after law school there in 1990, qualified in 92, stayed in the profession with them for another 2 years, then went to a small firm in Camden for just under a year, and then I stopped being a lawyer in 95. I got ill and I had several weeks of recuperation, and during that time I lost my job, and so I found myself sort of ill and unemployed for a while, and then I've sort of wandered my way back into law firms over the next few years, and have been in working in law firms now since 2000. So that's 25 years.
Wow. That sounds like an amazing and such a rich upbringing and experiences that you've had all the way from early school life, and then at university must have been completely different environments that you would have had to get used to and sort of persevere through. So what was it like starting out in law? Can you share a standout moment from your early career that shaped your path, or lessons from your childhood and university that you've taken and brought into your legal career?
Yeah, I remember just being intimidated by the size of the law firm. And I remember we were told on our first day that the law firm had its own postcode. And it also had its own phone number. I can't remember what the number was, but it was one of those ones that finishes with 4 zeros. So it's quite a prestigious phone number. And I remember us all being like, oh my God, didn't know that you could have a firm that was that big and that powerful. And that sort of pervaded me through the first 2 or 3 years, because some of the sums of money that we were dealing with in litigation or in real estate were just massive. I mean, there were millions. And so it was quite difficult to get your head around that. And significant moments, I remember working in employment team for 6 months. I really liked that work. I could really relate to it. I had a really brilliant boss, Stephanie Dale. And I couldn't, unfortunately, qualify back into that group because they didn't have enough work to take on an NQ. I ended up qualifying into commercial litigation, and whilst I was there, I did some work for an organisation called the International Transport Workers Federation. They were essentially seafarers around the world on various ships. They tended to be from poorer countries, Bangladesh, African countries, Indonesia, etc. And they were often working on ships that had flags of convenience, by which I mean they were flagged in jurisdictions that meant it was difficult to sue them or sue the owners of the ships. And so there was quite a lot of abuse that went on in terms of the seafarers. So they quite often wouldn't be paid, or they would be working really unhealthy, unsafe positions, and we would represent their union workers. So it's quite exciting stuff, like you used to arrest ships and what have you. But what I remember is a Portuguese sailor who was essentially garroted by an unshackled anchor and chain which was swiped across his body, injured him quite badly. And I remember that we worked to get some money that would allow him to live and be cared for in his later life. And just seeing that happen was quite a pivotal moment, because it's then that you realise that, having laws and having lawyers that can help you with those laws can really make a difference to someone's life. So that was the main bit. But I also remember there was a ship that had been struck a tidal wave just off Scotland, and the tidal wave had just gone through the main bit of the ship, particularly where the crew were. And I saw pictures of dead bodies, essentially, because 3 or 4 of these Russian sailors had just been killed by the force of this tidal wave. So that was a bit of a moment where you realise just how real stuff is, and that being a lawyer is a very protected, comfortable-ish, not going to kill you, hopefully, type job. So that sort of was a moment. And then I also worked pro bono for the Terence Higgins Trust, which is the largest UK sexual health charity. At the time was a charity that was particularly focused on HIV and AIDS. And we had a number of clients that we worked for, all of whom have died within 2 or 3 years of me meeting them, and we were acting against their employers to try and get them early pension benefits, or against debt collection agencies who were trying to get money out of them, or with landlords trying to have them not be evicted. And so I went to quite a few funerals in my 20s of my clients, and that sort of strikes you that life can take you. You don't know when life can take you. So, and then again, it's the importance of having laws and good lawyers around you to represent you. But, I also did other work like oil pollution or mortgage fraud or shipping insurance, hull protection coverage, or employment handbooks for restaurants and stuff. So a lot of other stuff. But it was the stuff that really affected people that really affected me, I think.
It's really inspiring to see that you were in that area of law, and moments like those really shaped your views and impacted you in that way, where you were seeing these sort of sad situations, but also the impact you were having as a lawyer and able to help them. So it makes me want to ask, prior to working on those cases, and whilst you were, let's say, a trainee, for example, do you think you were still swaying towards working on work where it's having a meaningful impact? And if so, what stemmed that in you? What made you make that decision that you want to work in an area of law where you're going to have an impact on someone's life and you're going to work for noble causes, I guess, rather than other areas of law where the law's not so person to person and it can be more transactional based?
I wish I could say that it was a conscious choice and that I made it like a moral decision to work in that. But I think what was actually going on was I was quite unhappy doing the corporate work, which just, was slightly different. It was one organisation against people or one organisation against another organisation. And generally in litigation, something's gone wrong. So there's a lot of pressure. It's quite tense and people are not very happy. So that sort of work not necessarily being purposeful and it being quite a stressful situation, I think made me not so happy. And in retrospect, I didn't realise it at the time, but what my bosses were trying to do was give me work that I found purposeful, which I did. And, I really felt that it was good work to be doing, but I also felt it was just more work to some degree. So I think it wasn't that I made a conscious decision, but my bosses were being pretty savvy in trying to bring me in line and give me purpose. It didn't really work out at that firm, and I left after a couple of years of qualification. But what it did make me think, because I stopped being a lawyer, as I say, in 95, and I still had friends and, in fact, boyfriends who got ill and got infected and what have you. I think it just made me reflect on that there is stuff that you can be doing that's useful. I can't say as I wanted to take the pay cut and properly go and work in the third sector, and I didn't, but I found purpose in other ways, and particularly through my sort of L&D work. I quite like helping people and showing them stuff that's going to make them better at their jobs and enjoy their jobs more and fulfill their career. So that's sort of the purpose that I found. But please don't think I'm anything as good or as worthy or as praise due as legal aid lawyers or charity lawyers or anybody that's doing the really brilliant, amazing work. I just did some of it, and it just became something that was really good for me and for my spirit to keep doing.
Yeah. And I guess it stuck by you, and it takes us quite nicely onto our next section, and a topic that I'm really fortunate to be talking to you about. And I'd strongly encourage our listeners to listen in carefully. This is one that's about people, value and ethics in the legal professional, which I'm sure Patrick is going to give us lots of information about. So I'll kick this topic off with, and I know you've touched on it a little bit with your previous answer. What values have guided you in your career, especially when you're facing difficult decisions?
Yeah, I think let's remember the context within which a number of lawyers are working, and my main experience has been working in big corporate commercial organisations, but I have worked pro bono for a charity, and I have worked in the social mobility space, and I have worked for a high street firm. But if I think mainly around the sort of the corporate commercial, the big law type stuff, I think it's worth just reflecting that that's the context within which you're working, and going into that without your eyes open and thinking that you're going to be doing this really moral, ethical work and that you have a strong value system. I'm not sure that you can go in with that and go, that's the only work that I want to be doing and still get the salary. So it's worth having a word with yourself and just going, okay, I've decided to go here. I can make some good out of it, but I need not to convince myself incorrectly that I can only do the worthy work. So within that context, I think it's worth having a moment every so often just to sit down with yourself and just say, is this the sort of work that I should be doing, I want to be doing, that should be done? What is my gut saying? Does this feel right? Does it feel wrong? I'm not quite sure in the middle. Who is it serving and how? There are certain clients I would be uncomfortable working for. There are certain matters where I don't really want to rush in and support because I don't fundamentally believe that's a good thing to be happening in the world. And also think about if someone was watching me doing this work, someone that I respect, what would they say? Would they say that's good work to do, or that's a good decision to make, that's a good task to do, or not? What would it look like if that email that you just sent was held up in court and read out, and you had to read it out because you're on the witness stand? And what would your managing partner say? So I remember when I was a junior, that if you made a mistake, you sort of wanted it to go away, and you didn't necessarily go and say, here is a mistake, here is a thing that is worrying to your boss. And ethically, that's got to be wrong, hasn't it? And you have to sit down, and there will be those situations in your life and go, if someone I respect was watching and they saw me take this course of action or not take this course of action, what would they be saying to me? I think part of that is having the right people around you. So surround yourself with a myriad of different people that you respect, whose values system you think is correctly aligned to what people should be believing in, and without breaching client confidentiality, ask them about stuff and see what they say. I have at least 5 or 6 people around me that I can go to and go, I'm not sure on this. And some of them will say it's fine on some occasions, but some of them will say, no, absolutely, the right course of action is to do this, and what you're proposing is wrong. And just bear in mind, you'll be in a pressured situation, you'll be working really fast. Some of the stuff you won't necessarily understand, but sitting with yourself every so often, having that conversation. In the last month, have I done good work? Do I feel proud of that work? I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think it's really important for us as junior lawyers, because we're so early on in our career, we can often overlook this and just be so focused on we're coming out of uni, just want a training contract and, just get on with it. And you overlook these really important things. And sometimes just giving yourself that time and reflecting on the type of work you're doing, what's the purpose, what does it impact? It'll just make you help you make better informed career decisions and end
Yeah,
up
I
on a
agree.
path where you're a lot happier.
I agree, and I will say, as I think of reference, there's a path to be navigated here, and I think it's all right to do, not just be doing amazing work all the time, because we do need to earn money, we do need to make a living, and there are only so many jobs that are really pure jobs. So, but you can counterbalance that a bit by doing other work, and all of the big firms will have opportunities to do work that is worthy for vulnerable people in society or on causes that matter. And well, currently at least, depending on what happens over in America and how that percolates over here. So there is good work that could be done, but it is worth checking in with yourself every so often, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes me nicely onto my next question. You might think corporate law firms, and in that commercial context, they are doing enough of this, or you might think that they need to do more. So how do you think law firms within that corporate and commercial environment, the larger firms and institutions, can better support inclusivity and value-driven work cultures?
Yeah, thank you. I think we know that there are a number of perspectives around DE&I, and there's some stuff coming out from the other side of the Atlantic that is worth noticing, I think, and taking a moment on. But I believe that where we currently are is most law firms want to do the right thing, most of the time. And part of that is that they want to run organisations where their people can be as successful as they can be, feel valued, feel like they belong, and that brings lots of different perspectives into the law firm that make it better and make it more profitable or more effective at doing what it needs to be doing. And they also do that in order to they'll also reach out to communities that are underrepresented in order that they get more people who are talented into their organisations, and that's good. But I think the incoming generations have a right to be heard and recognise that right to be heard. And so I think it is useful, definitely, to let your feelings be known, raise issues with people that you think, those issues should be raised with, to come up with ideas and initiatives that might help organisations to make sure that, good people are coming in, that they are assisted where they need to be assisted, where they are not excluded, where they are allowed to progress, whoever they are. So I think all of that is really useful and should continue to be done. But there are 3 or 4 things that I think law firm leaders can do. So I think it's really helpful to hold leadership and middle management to account, and where things are being done well, celebrate that, broadcast it, recognise that, reward it. Where they're not, or where people are not acting in line with policies that would allow people to feel like they're belonging, then that needs to be called out and dealt with. And one of the best things I ever saw in one law firm I worked at was there was one person that was particularly not very helpful, a lateral hire, and was really denigrating people and making them very upset and causing a lot of unnecessary bad feeling amongst colleagues. And his employment was terminated, and an email went round the firm explaining why, that this wasn't in line with what the firm stood for, that we wouldn't tolerate this sort of behaviour, and that person left. And overnight, I think morale and a sense of being valued in that firm went up 20-25%, because that was a public stand. Other things I think law firms could be doing is standing really strong under the pressure that's currently happening at the moment, to stand by their values, which should include bringing in the best talent from wherever, helping anyone that needs help, recognising people for their talents, and progressing them upwards, acknowledging and redressing inappropriate bias where it comes about. And that's what I think law firms should be doing. I have a particular thing about partner dining rooms, and I would like to see those not really happen going forward. I think it's more useful for people to be people rather than partners and non-partners. So I'd like to see a bit more of that. And then now I think is the time to listen to your professionals in this space and lean upon them, seek their guidance, and then try and implement their guidance. We're under significant pressure, I think, at the moment to step back from some of the things that I think we should be standing right behind at the moment.
Yeah, and that's all really insightful. And you've told us lots of things we should be seeing and things that we are seeing that create inclusivity and a positive working environment. So, since you're talking to a lot of junior lawyers, what would you love to see, and what core characteristics and traits and things that junior lawyers should be focusing on to foster this sort of positive environment that's inclusive in the future?
So I definitely think there's coming in as yourself, not seeking to assimilate, but come in as who you are, sharing your stories, sharing your perspectives, come in with a mindset where you want to grow and you want to help others grow and work towards creating connections and collaboration and community within your organisation. Join the ERGs, the networks in your organisation, actively support, actively ally others, assume positive intent from your colleagues rather than getting into a conflict situation, and really just get involved and get behind what the firm is doing. And then there's a piece where if you think your employer is going in a direction which you don't think is helpful, and you can do this in a way, if you can do this in a way where your career, you feel you're confident that your career won't be negatively impacted, then I think raise some of those issues. We're seeing some of this in America, and we're seeing some really courageous stands, I think, being taken by associates, whether they're entirely correct or accurate. Where the rightness or wrongness is, I think, remains to be seen. But I do admire that sort of bravery as well. And I think it's just even just by being in the organisation and being yourself and visibly being yourself can make a difference. I get this a lot, or I got this a lot when I was in my law firm, and certainly through my profile on LinkedIn. I got and still get 2 or 3 comments most days where people say they like the fact that I am myself and out, and that gives them some strength to do the same. So those are the things that I would say. Certainly try not to prejudice your job too much.
Yeah, and it's just being a bit more confident in yourself and being open to the fact that people want to get to know you, what values you have, what you enjoy doing, what defines you as a person, more than just someone that wants to do the job and is just purely focused on the job, because it's character that lets you connect with people.
It is. I mean, we all know that, part of wanting to work with someone is knowing them a bit, knowing what they're about, who they are, being able to connect with them on some level, whatever that is. I don't know, if you might be playing Dungeons and Dragons, you might have gone to, you might have had different school experiences that you can talk about. You might have particular interests in areas of the law that you can connect with, or different areas of the law where you can educate back and forth. And just creating that connection, I think, is what most of us want. Most of us want to know a bit about the other people that we work with. And where I see this work is where people are happy to be themselves. And for anybody that gets into any law firm, you will have done well to get into the law firm, and definitely reflect on that and bring that successful person with that track record, bring that person in to the organisation rather than bringing in the most junior lawyer in the organisation. If you see what I mean, you've done really well to get that job. Bring that person in. Don't bring the person that's going to be like, oh, I'm at the bottom of the pile. That's not how it works.
Yeah, please correct me if I have misunderstood you there, Patrick. And I think that's a really great tip for those that are applying for training contracts. That authentic self of yourself, that you're being, that person that you're trying to get across, continue that. The skills that got you into the room, just carry on being that way. Would you say those being yourself and trying to get yourself across, telling people what makes you different?
Yeah, I would. I mean, it's always it's very difficult to try and be someone else, I think, is the first thing. So if that's what you're trying to do, just know that will exhaust you, and it's not going to be that effective, because you're not going to be able to do it for very long. And it does sound pat to go just be yourself, but I think what it means is come in having self-assessed who you are, what you're about, what your strengths are, where your areas are that you want to develop, what the sort of stuff that you want to do, the sort of stuff you want to be known for, and bring that fully understood person into the organisation. So really, talk to your friends. What do you think of me? How would you describe me? Talk to people that you worked with. Look at the marks that you got on your papers. Get the feedback that you've got from people, and take that sort of fully aware person. If you can have a heightened sense of awareness of yourself, I think that stands you in good stead. And the fact that you've got in should be a big part of the thing that's on your clipboard where you're assessing yourself.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And that takes us on to City Sentry. If you could give our listeners and viewers a little bit about what City Sentry is, their story, what gap did you see, and what did it aim to fill, and how it helps?
Yeah, sure. So
trainees.
So here we go. City Sentry is a collaboration of around about 50 London based law firms. They all have a base in London. And what they now do, unusually, is work together as 50 firms to offer out, currently it's about 150 solicitor apprentice positions in the city. Most of those are given to year 13s or maybe people on gap year after doing their A-levels or their IB or their BTECs. And those people come in as solicitor apprentices. They work for 6 years, during which time they have 4 days in the office and 1 day in law school, or the equivalent, and they will take a law degree and the Solicitors Qualifying Exam 1 and Solicitors Qualifying Exam 2 and emerge as newly qualified lawyers 6 years later. The gap that we saw in the market at the time, when we started, there were about 15 firms in London. There are now 50. And the gap, Joanna Hughes, my co-CEO, ex-Allen & Overy was, A&O Sherman as is, and I saw that there was lots of good intent, but it was quite a difficult job to do, to bring in these people on a scheme, find them, identify them, inspire them, get them through the process and bring them in. And most firms were taking on 3 or 4, could potentially take on 3 or 4. And there's a disproportionate amount of work that needed to be done if you did it by yourself. So we got all those firms together and we did it collaboratively and worked out how we were going to recruit, created a platform, created a presence on social media, ran big events that none of the firms could have done by themselves, and essentially acted as a unit. And these firms are very competitive, do not work together very often work against each other, or certainly on the other sides of matters, and certainly don't tend to recruit together. And so we managed to solve a problem which was in the too hard box. We wanted to bring these people in, but we're not sure quite how to do it. Most of our people, I think 98% of them when they started were somewhere between 18 and 24. The vast majority, well over half, come from socioeconomic backgrounds. A number of them are free school mealers or first generation to university, or have parents who don't work in professions. There's not very many of them that have connections to London law before. So we are creating a new talent pipeline. We're bringing in 150 or so each year, and they are changing the firms that they're in, and by doing that are changing, and I would say bettering the legal sector. They bring in different backgrounds, different perspectives, different ways of doing things, different ideas, a different energy, and that's the exciting thing that we've done. Colin Passmore, who's the chair of the City of London Law Society and has been a lawyer for many decades, says it's the single most impactful social mobility initiative that he has seen in his time here. So that's, in 40 years, that's a nice thing to hear.
Yeah, it definitely is. And it's really motivating to see these law firms coming together and working together like you see, because usually they're always on the other side of matters, but for this cause, they're all come together. Sorry.
No, I was going to say, yeah, it is. And we've got a number of firms, about 10, that have been recruiting at the moment and have been making their offers around about now. And the reports we're getting from those firms, it's the first time they're applying, is they are just blown away by the talent that they're seeing. They're saying these people are really impressive. So, well done, the solicitor apprentices, for being so fantastic. It's worth saying that the competition is really steep. Most, if not all, of the solicitor apprentices will have come from a pool of hundreds, if not more than 1,000, to get their jobs. So they are, by their nature, they have to be exceptional to make it through that process.
Yeah, and I guess City Century interacts with those candidates and students. So what do you see in those students? How do you identify the ones that are really exceptionally well? And in terms of areas so just speaking broadly, what sort of areas do you see junior lawyers need more support in today's day and age? And what tools and resources are you offering to those lawyers to support them?
Yeah, so what law firms will tend to be looking for is a combination of things, and they will be broadly similar. There'll be some differences, but broadly similar. So they will look for definitely that the person is clever enough, that they are focused, that they are driven, that they can work with others, that they can be organised and effective in delivering work, that they have a real interest in the city and to some degree an understanding of it. Useful if they can be passionate about what they do, and if they can have an understanding of how, for our firms at least, how business operates and how money is made. That's useful. It's great if they are strong communicators, and advocates, and we like if they are giving back into a community, so that it's not just about themselves, but that they are good comes in, good comes out from them. Most of the firms will be running processes, multi-stage processes, which will be trying to seek those things out. Where I think it's more difficult for junior lawyers to demonstrate that they have a particular skill is where the acquisition of that skill tends to come about by having exposure to whatever the thing is. Understanding how a commercial law firm works, understanding how profits happen, what margin looks like, what leverage levels need to look like, how lockup works, and all that sort of stuff, why clients are doing certain deals, why organisations are suing other organisations. Understanding that tends to come about because you work on matters or you work in an organisation that is working on those matters. So that's quite difficult to demonstrate when you are coming out of school or you're coming out of university. So commercial awareness is a real thing. So a couple of references, I think, for you here. There are various websites that deal with this. I call out Little Law. That's also, I think, Commercial Lawyer. And I think there's Corporate Lawyer as well. So there are a number of information sharers out there. I'd recommend those. Definitely look at our City Century website, because we have lots of video programs on our website and through TikTok and mainly Instagram and mainly LinkedIn, where we try and share some of this mysterious stuff. And then the other things I think I would suggest in junior lawyers at the moment is self-management, by which I mean not just getting the work done, but just managing your own energy, managing your own stress, managing your own health. I think as the world gets more and more draining and more challenging, being able to master that is a really good early skill to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes us on to our next topic about mental health and career sustainability. So how can firms build cultures where junior lawyers from all different types of backgrounds can thrive?
I think the first thing is make sure you're bringing in people from different cultures and different perspectives. And I see that, happening really well. It has been happening for a number of years. And I'm always pleased when I will see law firms show their incoming trainee intake or their incoming solicitor apprentice intake. And I appreciate you can only know so much from a photo, but quite often it looks like the UK. It looks like it's that we have different ethnicities, different genders, what look like different people that are bringing in different perspectives. So I think that's really good. And I'd argue that, we've got pretty good around the entrance side. Then I think it's about making sure that those people feel that they can be themselves, can speak up, and that you listen when they can. It's useful, I think, to give training and education around self-management, around mental health issues, and then to install, this sounds sinister and it's not meant to, but install monitoring systems so that you can see how much someone is working, when they're coming in, when they're going out, how much they're billing, etc. And when that is particularly low, when it's particularly high, questioning that and to some degree, certainly starting conversations, but maybe intervening as well. We know that, for example, junior lawyers don't like to be not busy. We know that most of them like to be really busy, but they can sometimes lose perspective about what's too busy. So a firm having some sort of system around that, and then support around it, including company doctors or access to company medical, having people in HR that you can talk to, having access to gyms, etc., having therapists that you can talk to. I think all of that helps. And I'm really optimistic about how that's changing, because a number of different people were coming in 10, 15 years ago, and they are now in positions of influence / power / decision making. I'm really pleased to see that there are differences being made. Having said all of that, the job's hard. The partners want to earn a certain amount of money. In order to do that, they need clients that will pay the rates that will allow them to earn that money. Those clients will tend to be working on big, complicated, international, cross-jurisdictional, cross-practice area, cross-disciplinary type matters. That will need people who have a certain type of brain, a certain type of structure, a certain type of team size, and who will work really intensely, long hours for long durations of time. And so that does create, as a natural byproduct, challenges around health and mental health and well-being for people working on those matters, and the people that work with the people that work around on those matters as well. So it is a thing that definitely needs to be monitored all the way along the line. I'm really pleased that we're having more and more people talking about this, and that this is seen as being an issue. I believe this will be a priority issue for firms going forward over the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it takes us back to the start of the podcast where you told our listeners to really ask themselves what their values are, what they really want. And part of that does come into the fact, if you're going to go into a cross-jurisdictional practice area or something that's really demanding and taxing, then you can sort of expect that the workload is also going to be really intense. and it's something you should be aware of prior to putting yourself in that position, so you can sort of mentally prepare for that.
Exactly right.
And it makes me want to ask, what's something junior lawyers can personally do to protect their well-being in these high-pressure environments?
Yeah, I think a few things here. So definitely being really clear about what you can withstand and what works well and what doesn't work so well for you. We can all, I think, work a few days in a row that are really long and intense. Does that work if it's for several months? Maybe have in mind what a tolerable lifestyle would be for you. And when it's aligned with that, that's great. When it's not, maybe we need to stop and just have a look and have a chat to someone. I would say know that some of the time it is going to be hard. So it isn't that, the first thing that comes in, the first setback that you get, that's the time to ring all the alarm bells. But you don't want it to be happening often and all the time. Definitely do things like at the end of the week, think about what you've done, think about what was good, think about what you've learned as a result of that, so that you can bring your own morale and your own self-appreciation up a bit. Know that typically the bad times, the high pressure, will pass. And treat yourself as your own patient, by which I mean, if you were a doctor and you saw yourself, if you see what I mean, as a lawyer, working like that, would you be thinking that was healthy? Would you be thinking that some change might need to be contemplated and possibly implemented? And if you can step outside of yourself and go, is that working for that person or not? And you can do that accurately. I think that's really helpful. There is a tendency in law firms to deify overworking. Gosh, aren't they great? They've done 90 hours this week or what have you. I just think that's worth thinking about. But I also don't think this is an easy job that you can go in and do 30 hours a week and spend time on social media and have lots of coffees and yoga and still get paid. It's not at that end of the jobs market, I'm afraid. And then finally, there's all the normal stuff that you'd expect about getting outside, getting exercise, meditation, yoga, eating really well, stepping out of situations that become too stressful, taking rest, trying to get you sleep. And look out for the warning signs: irritability, exhaustion, not being able to sleep, eating bad food, not being able to get to the gym, not seeing your friends, for example. Those would be warning signs.
Yeah, that's all really helpful information. And one thing I've been doing for the last year or so is I've got a folder at work, and it's labeled positive stuff. And I occasionally drop in information or emails that I've had, or even if it's a telephone call with someone, and if they've given me some sort of positive feedback or just nice words, I just put it in there. And then when you're feeling down, or when you're just having a difficult day, or when you're feeling demotivated, just take a glance at the folder. And you'll always do it at least once a year or twice a year when you have your reviews, because you need to look at that information, and it just gives you that nice boost and encouragement that you need, especially in a demanding environment.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I've heard those referred to as the smile file, so it makes you smile when you read back at it. I also think it's worth doing it for yourself. And so if anybody were to go on my LinkedIn profile and look at my posts, there's one where I talk about Feel Good About Yourself Friday, which is, I think it's worth every Friday taking 5 minutes and thinking back, what have I done this week? What have I learned? What went well, and what do I have to do to make that happen? How can I deploy that somewhere else? And you have to I think it really helps to be your own inner cheerleader and for you to recognise, because everybody's busy, right? So they might not get to send you that email, but you going, I withstood that, I did a good thing there, that really worked, that didn't work so well, but I learned from it. Just doing that self-audit, which is the sort of thing you're doing an audit by third parties, but if you were to do the self-audit, I think it will add to it as well. But definitely, be kind to yourself and appreciate yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think when you sell it as a self-audit, it's a music to junior lawyers' ears, because they're probably thinking it's something technical, it's something that, law firms like hearing if you're aware of what audits are and how they evaluate performance, etc.
Exactly.
But yeah, in a way, yeah, I guess that makes sense. You're sort of self-auditing yourself. You've got a checklist, or you're monitoring your performance, and it's a really good skill to have in general and can be applied in lots of different situations.
Exactly that.
And our final little segment is navigating the legal industry in 2025 and beyond. In terms of learning and development, what do you think early career lawyers should be focusing on?
So turn up is the first thing I would say. You definitely want to nail the practical, technical, legal stuff that you'll be doing. So, go to all the inductions, read all the stuff, make sure you're engaging with the e-learning, etc. A lot of learning is actually being there and making yourself open to it. Definitely there's learning by observation that you can do. So just see what other people around you do ask to be in meetings so that you can observe the emails that someone else is sending, and just work out what they did to make the email that way, so that you increase your vessel of knowledge as you go. And then alongside technical legal, I think there's stuff around doing and the delivery of the job where I think AI and project management is a big piece. Creating connections with people who are colleagues or might become clients, I think is really, really important as well. There's the learning about yourself piece. I think really important. Where do I work well? What am I learning from that? How do I not operate? How can I regulate my emotions? Where do I sort of want to get to? I think learning about yourself is really important as well, because you're the only one that's going to be with yourself for the whole of your life. So knowing that person, I think, is very important, because then it helps you make sure that person gets into good situations.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess knowing yourself really, really well makes it easier to sell yourself. The better you understand yourself, the better you can communicate with people, the more conversations you can have, the better the working environment around you.
Exactly right. Exactly right.
So in the future, what do you think will separate the good from the great legal professionals? Let's say the next decade, for example.
So I think it's the ability to deliver on matters in a way that is effective, efficient, impactful. And that will include being able to use legal tech, having the right people around you, knowing what connections to make, having good judgment, good decision-making skills, etc. I think the human connection thing is going to become bigger and bigger. I also reckon the ability to see forward and anticipate, especially in a world that is changing so fast all the time, and where you get different edicts coming out from governments, several times a day, it would appear. The ability to sort of navigate that uncertainty and begin to go, I think this is where it's going, is really important. And I think having a strong ethical base is going to be more. And then it's the self-management piece. I think the ones that will be really successful are the ones that can find a happy way of working and delivering work in a way that works for the client, the organisation they're working for, and most importantly, themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And are there any skill sets, whether they're technical or interpersonal, you think are undervalued right now?
Empathy, people leadership, or connection with people, and particularly that includes clients, and the use and accurate deployment of AI. I know I keep saying AI, and those are the main things.
And how do you think junior lawyers can develop the soft skills like empathy and sympathy? Because they're things we're not often taught. It's either you can be empathetic or not, or do you find there are resources or situations that develop those?
Yeah, 70% of it is about learning on the job. A smaller portion is about observing others and learning from what they're doing, both good and bad. And then 10% is probably through formal learning or e-learning or whatever it might be. I would do a lot of watching, a lot of asking questions when people are not too busy, and keeping a learning log every week, every month, going, what have I learned? As part of your feel good about yourself Friday. I think that's really key to getting yourself to a place that's going to make it helpful for you going forward.
Okay. What opportunities should junior lawyers be paying attention to that might not be on their radar just yet?
Definitely your ability to work with tech and to teach upwards and outwards and deploy it well. Do not rely on any of the firm's AI tools to do all of the work, but it can certainly create stuff, critique stuff, curate stuff for you in a way that is helpful. Being aware of that, I think, can help. I would say ethics about who you are. And then my sense is that there's going to be a lot of change coming down the line, starting in America, and the results of that could change the way business is done, trade is transacted, laws are implemented, regulations are imposed, etc. So I think being able to cope with that change will bring us lots of opportunities. Lawyers are never, in a world that's good, in a world that's bad, in a world that's positive, in a world that's negative, lawyers will always be busy. But dealing with that change, I think, are where your opportunities could be. And then finally, I think you can go in and educate others about how you see things, how you coming from your background, gives you a way of looking at things. I think that sort of upward and outward education that you can do is really, really helpful. Questioning the status quo every so often and saying, well, I've seen we're doing it this way. What would we think if we did it that way?
Yeah, absolutely. And those were all the questions I had for yourself, Patrick. And I just want to say a massive thank you. And it's been really insightful and amazing. I'm definitely going to have to watch over it again because of the amount of information and value you've given. And I'm sure our listeners and viewers will also feel the same way. Before we conclude this podcast, I've got a quick fire round. Okay, so the first one book every lawyer should read.
The obvious is To Kill a Mockingbird. Any John Grisham novel to make you think that you're in a really exciting industry. Fee Negotiations by Ori Weiner is a brilliant book about how work is done. And then follow William Peake and Richard Moorhead, and to some degree me, on LinkedIn. And then there's a really good book by Richard Romuald called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy.
Okay. A favourite legal tech tool or app?
So I think I'm at the wrong end of my career to be really on top of it. But I do like Doodle.
Okay.
Being able to work out when a meeting should take place when you've got 8 or 9 people to do it. And I have found ChatGPT useful to start my thinking on stuff, or also to comment on what I'm thinking, in terms of particularly, if you've got a blank piece of paper, it's a really good thing to use when you don't know where you're going. A lot of it depends on how you engineer your prompts, of course, but that I think is a good thing. But then here's one of my warnings about ChatGPT. It comes back to you perfectly punctuated with glorious grammar and formatted well. Don't be deceived into thinking that means the content.
Yeah. Okay. And one non-legal habit that's improved your work life?
Well, it's interesting that you saw this question and it said non-legal, and I'm like, is that an illegal habit? What's it talking about? But if you're talking about stuff that's helped my work life.
Yeah, outside of your work life.
Yeah, my dogs. Having to take my dogs for a walk, at least once a day, and I get 3 walks, and I have to do at least one of them when I was working, when I was really stressed. I'm not saying everybody needs to get a dog, but it's useful to have an outlet that gets you out.
Yeah, absolutely. And then most underrated piece of advice you've ever received?
Yeah, so from my late dad, he said 2 things. One, take your work very seriously, but don't take yourself seriously at all. And I completely stand by that. He didn't say this to me, but I noticed this with him. He spoke to everyone, so I do that. Spoke to absolutely everyone, 500 people. I'm at his funeral. That's what I would like to aspire to, that you've touched lots of lives. And then he used to say, don't let the bastards get you down. You might have to bleep that bit out, but I think that's really important as well.
Okay, wow. And the final question, a legal trend you're most excited about?
So I don't know whether this is a legal trend, but the community that is being built in law on LinkedIn, helped by TBD Marketing and Simon Marshall, and the surveys that he does, I have got loads of really brilliant friends now, many of whom I haven't actually met, but whose judgment I value, whose value system I really appreciate, and who I go to for guidance and advice. And I think that particular social media platform is just a wonderful space at the moment, much better than some of the other social media platforms.
Amazing. Well, there you have it. That's been our episode with Patrick McCann, and it's been absolutely amazing. Again, thank you, Patrick. You've given us lots of information and stuff to think about that I'm sure is going to benefit a lot of junior lawyers' careers. And yeah, it's been absolutely amazing recording this episode with you, and hopefully we stay in contact.
Yeah, and that would be nice. And for anybody that wants to sort of connect with me or follow me on LinkedIn, please do. I'm known as Chatty Patty for a reason, and I try and put stuff out there that I think might help others. And I have had lots of experiences in my life and in my work life particularly. And I want to share some of those so that you are prepped if they have happened to you.